Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. As we talked about when the data came out, 2020 saw a historic number of deaths from overdoses, drug overdoses, deaths of addiction, deaths of despair, however you want to describe them. 93,000 people died from drug overdoses. It was up about 25% year over year. And by the way, predicted because of the lockdowns, or certainly predicted that the lockdowns would exacerbate the number of drug overdose deaths, which it did. Someone who's been covering the opioid epidemic for some time is Sam Quinones, who's a journalist. He's the author of the 2015 book, Dreamland, The True Tale of America's Opiate Epidemic. And he's got a new book out, same similar topic, but 5 years distance, 6 years distance, so some additional perspective. The Least of Us, True Tales of America and Hope in the Time of Fentanyl and Meth. Sam, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's really nice to be on with you all. Thanks very much.
So the time in between your first book back in 2015 and this new book, The Least of Us, what have you seen transpire from your researching and reporting and writing?
Well, I guess two things, and that's really worth the framework of The Least of Us. One was set out to tell the story of a global economy, primarily though down in Mexico, producing catastrophic, supplies of dope, cheaper and more potent than ever, and really initiating the synthetic era of drugs in which land and sunlight and seasons don't really matter. Plant-based drugs are kind of going away. The other, though, is about kind of Americans' quiet attempts to, in my opinion, recover community through simple acts, guided by the belief, which is, I believe, the message of the addiction crisis and the pandemic itself, is that we're strongest in community, as weak as our most vulnerable, and that the least of us lies within us all. And so part of that, the next book, about half the next book, is stories of folks like that, trying to forge, in my opinion, what amounts to our best defense, which is returning to community, which we've done so much in so many ways to shred over the last 40 years, seems to me.
So the returning to community, give us a sense of the form that takes, because I sort of am inclined to agree with you, but it seems at the same time, as you were sort of, I think, insinuating, over the last 40 years we've become more atomized, and particularly in the digital age we've become even more atomized from there. So the renewed sense of community.
And I think that's it's very astute. That's exactly what I believe has happened. And so when I set out to do this book, I looked to find these really small stories. I wanted small stories of people who no one's ever heard of doing these kinds of acts. So, for example, there's a fellow in Muncie, Indiana, who, as his neighborhood disintegrated after a couple of very, very large factories closed, he kind of almost in a guerrilla form kept the local community center open, even as the city moved to close it, shut down budget for it. He kept the key, and he would open it for the kids and open it for the guys on Sunday when they want to play basketball, and the seniors who wanted to play cards. Unbeknownst to the city, he kept this community center going as the neighborhood kind of essentially was falling apart, and it provided a core for that. It's a woman who retiree from corporate America, who uses her late husband's insurance settlement to buy a tattoo removal machine, and sets about removing tattoos of the people she's tutoring in jail, removing, for example, the tattoo a pimp had put on the inner thigh of a young woman, kind of branding her as his prostitute, removing that tattoo, remove swastikas and teardrops and spider webs and all that. It's those kinds of stories that are not a prescription, I don't think. I'm not saying this is what you have to do in America. Mm-hmm. It's more of an attitude. Like, this is how we need to fight this, is understanding we return to community and fight that atomization that you correctly notice is part of life in America now, sadly.
Well, and what about just moving forward about the underworld, about this new addiction population that was created by the opioid epidemic and synthetic
Right.
drugs, and how synthetic drugs have really taken this to a whole new level?
Exactly. That's exactly what's happened. With synthetic drugs, you no longer care about a land. All you really care about is access to shipping ports, because through shipping ports, you can get access to the world's chemical markets, and they have two very large ports on the Pacific coast of Mexico. What this means is that you can now produce drugs. These are very cheap drugs to produce, so you can produce them extraordinarily cheaply and all year round, provided you have the chemicals with which to do so. And that is what's really been happening. That's on the very sinister side of the story. That's really what I've found has been happening over the last few years. That enormous supply is changing drug use and kind of time-honored ideas about the drug trade. So anybody can be a kingpin if you can find enormous quantities. Almost you can sell quantities that 5 years ago would have been kingpin size quantities, and so this is what's happening, and it's primarily happening with two drugs in particular, fentanyl, of course, and methamphetamine, and those two drugs are found really now pretty much coast to coast in I would say catastrophic quantity.
There's been a number of documentaries over the last several years on this topic. There's TV shows that have taken it up in sort of a fictionalized way that's reflective of reality. Basically, the last season of Goliath with Billy Bob Thornton was all about Purdue Pharma, basically.
Right.
But is there something in your research and writing over the last several years? Is there something fundamental that those documentaries or TV shows, dramatizations, are missing about what's happening?
I would say one thing is, this was hampered a bit by the pandemic, I have to say, but I will say this, when I was writing Dreamland was really the first book about this topic, and when I was writing it, I sounded deathly silence accompanied. I could not find families anywhere who wanted to talk about this, about their loved one dying or their loved one's addiction, and so I really believe this book would fail because nobody wanted to talk. It was very much like the early days of the AIDS epidemic, fabricated obituaries. What has happened since then, since the book came out, I've watched what's just stunned, is this real spreading awareness. I think it's one of the great grassroots social movements we've seen in this country in the last 15, 20 years. Very unorganized, no spokesman, no organization, but it's all these people coming out of the shadows, right? All these people who've had family members addicted, and you see this all over the country on Facebook and churches. You see it at council meetings, and politicians have had to take note. And one of the big effects of all that has been all these lawsuits that you see now. We've had when I turned in Dreamland, there were three lawsuits against drug companies. There's now 2,600 prying money loose. In a way, so what this has done is kind of awakened people, pushed people into the public arena, and I think it's healthy for them. I certainly think it's healthy for the country, and it does work, I believe, against that atomization that was so fostered by drug addiction. Everyone was hiding in their room, afraid that people would find out how their loved one died and that kind of thing. I think that's changing. That's been changing for a few years now.
He is Sam Quinones, journalist and author of Dreamland, The True Tale of America's Opiate Epidemic. That was from 2015. The new book, The Least of Us, True Tales of America and Hope in the Time of Fentanyl and Meth. Sam, thanks for joining us, and good luck with the new book. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
The new administration has big plans for your health insurance, changes that can limit your choices. The Affordable Care Act created a one-size-fits-all plan. Healthcare is not a one-size-fits-all problem. The premise of the ACA is that coverage equals care. It does not. My name is Eric Wilson from ISA Health Incorporated, and I recently saved a family in their 50s almost $600 per month here in Chicago with the Pro-Life Health Plan. Act now. Protect yourself with a plan that cannot be canceled. This is a nationwide PPO which allows you to pick your doctors and hospitals. Start saving 30 to 60% today. If you are self-employed, purchase your own health insurance, or are uninsured, you can lock in a private plan managed by you, not the government. Call me, Eric Wilson, an expert with 17 years experience at 888-448-5370. That's 888-448-5370, or go to isellhealth.com. That's isellhealth.com, a conservative and affordable approach to healthcare. I look forward to speaking with you.
All right, there's a lot of tough questions when thinking about caring for your aging loved ones. Most importantly, can they stay safe at home? With Home Care Angels Home Services, they can. Home Care Angels have been providing holistic, compassionate, non-medical in-home care for the past 16 years. They service the city and the suburbs, and their caregivers are certified in dementia care, post-op joint replacement, and COVID-19. You'll get a highly qualified caregiver carefully selected for your loved one to help with activities of daily living, meal prep, light housework, and much more. Home Care Angels also takes extra precautions consistent with CDC guidelines to ensure quality and safety of all their clients. Here's the number to call for a free in-home assessment, 847-824-5221, or visit homecareangelsinc.com. Home Care Angels, providing exceptional care so your aging parents can live at home.
Liberty Mutual Insurance Company presents
and Doug. Limu, I'd say it's time you learn to drive, especially since Liberty Mutual customizes your